Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our second panel of the day. Two very special guests, J. Scott Campbell and IDW Scott Dunbier. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
It was a happy surprise. Yeah, Scott, you came to me a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, I want to do a panel. Who do you want?" And I'm like, "I don't know who you can get." And he mentioned J. Scott Campbell. I'm like, well, yeah, that would be perfect. So I'm so glad you guys could take the time out of I'm sure a busy weekend to hang out with us for an hour or so. Again, we actually only met one time, and I don't even know if we got a chance to talk, but it was at one of the big wows that Steve Morgan had put on.
Oh,
You were one of the guests of honor.
Yeah, it might have been the only one I did, but I did enjoy it. I guess at some point it converted to, I don't know. I know the San Francisco shows seem to always be in a state of changing shape and form and name, but yeah, no, that was fun. I do remember that. That's probably going back. Oh gosh, 10 years, maybe
at least
less. I don't know.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
but yeah, and the thing is, when I see you at San Diego, the line is always too long to go over and introduce myself. So I don't want to get in the middle of any fan's way of getting something signed or getting a sketch from you there. So
that's very polite of you. I mean, usually if it's somebody who I have peripheral knowledge of, they're certainly more than welcome to scoot up and say hi and do that kind of business. But I appreciate that.
I generally just walk up and when they stop me, I say, "Do you know who I am?"
Oh yeah, see, he throws a tantrum. It's pretty wild to see.
I just can't picture that, but maybe. All right. but hey, I'm going to leave the conversation to you both. I'll be hanging out in the green room showing some artwork while you guys are talking. And again, I hope everybody enjoys this panel. I've been waiting to see this panel probably more than any of the other ones this weekend. So have at it, guys, and enjoy.
Now the pressure's on.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Bill. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
So, Jeff, thank you very much for joining us on this. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Jeff, who's that?
Okay, I gotta explain something here. So, J. Scott Campbell, his family and almost everyone calls him Scott, except for the people from the studio, from
early
the
professional days,
studio, going way back. So, me and Scott Williams, Alex Sinclair, Sarah Becker. Does Jim still call you?
Oh, he pretty much calls me Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't get confused. His name is Jeff to us, but it's also Scott to most people. So,
nothing confusing about that at all.
Yeah, I know. So before we get started, I want to tell what I think is a funny story. Jeff, you've heard this story before. The first time I ever saw your work was in, I think, 1993. You had started at Wildstorm by then, right?
Yeah, that's the year I started. I'm pretty sure that's the year I sent my samples in too. I'm pretty sure anyway. So it's 93 is always what I consider to be that year. Yeah.
So I was still living in New York, and Jim Lee used to send me faxes, say, "Hey, check this out," And I remember he sent me faxes of your stuff, and I looked at it and I called him up. I said, "Man, I don't know. You're seeing this guy."
Dun, dun, wah, wah.
And such editorial brilliance.
Well, let me ask you this: were there? I mean, you don't have to name names, but did you have other ones that he showed you? Were like, "Oh, I can really see this guy blowing up," or this guy were there other ones you did react positively to, and I just happened to be one of the ones that not so much, or was it kind of was it underwhelming in general?
You're the only one that I really remember. I'm sure he said the other stuff, but
I made you eat your words. That's why you remember.
I can honestly say that I've become a very, very big fan of your work. I think you know that. But although I will tell you the truth, if there's something I don't like,
that is true. That is true. Yeah, folks, he doesn't sugarcoat if he doesn't like it. That is true.
But yeah, Jim, in the early days, I remember when I started at Wildstorm, one complaint I had about Wildstorm was that everybody kind of drew like Jim, and I kept on I kept on asking. I would suggest that he would diversify, try different guys. But you pretty soon I equated almost to Travis's early work, because Travis was very much like kind of a Jim guy, but then started making big jumps, and you started making big jumps too. I mean, you can see it in in Gen 13 from the first issue to the last, you know, and then the
Right.
miniseries after that, or not miniseries, but the regular series, you know, and then there was a huge jump when you went to Danger Girl.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think actually, if you look at even like you said, the Gen 13 first issue of the miniseries to the fifth, which was the last one, I think you would almost like see that like it almost looks like a different guy took over. It doesn't even look like the same guy. But you mentioned recently those first two issues of Gen 13 in particular. There was no script. I was just going off of Jim's layouts, which were really exciting at the time. I mean, I was a huge Jim Lee fan, so that was a fanboy's dream. But what I found was I was struggling with those first couple issues because I was drawing kind of over his bubble figures, and I could see what Jim's bubble figures really give you an idea of what a Jim page would look like if he finished it. So I think I was struggling to sort of like, well, I know what Jim would do with this page, but I'm only going to scratch the surface of what he could do. So there was this weird identity conflict going on until I got to the third issue of Gen 13, which was when I started doing my own layouts. And I think that was probably the first time where I could say, okay, what is my voice? What is my way of staging a page? And I think that's when my own when I started to actually emerge as whatever ended up being my style, you know.
Well, I think, you know, going back, you know, and I can totally see it to this day. You know, you're very much influenced by Mort Drucker, the old mad cartoonist, and I think that's one of the reasons why. Well, you have that sort of affinity for caricatures. You know, you do great likenesses and stuff, and then on your interior work, I think, you know, you're very much influenced by Disney animation. I mean, your work has a very fluid style. Obviously, you know, your early stuff was influenced also by Jim and by Art Adams. But I think,
Right.
I mean, would I be right in saying that Mort Drucker was your biggest early influence and Disney stuff also?
I definitely consider Mort Drucker my earliest I mean, I think of Mad Magazine as a comic book, even though I know it's kind of its own category. But I definitely think he was my first artist where I was like, oh, who's this guy? What's his name? I always recognize his work. What, you know, and yeah, my earliest days before I was in comic books, when I was still in high school, I would do newspaper strips and stuff like that for the school newspaper, and it was very Mort Drucker influenced. I try to crowbar caricatures into anything I could. But I actually kind of buried that influence for a while when I first got into comic books because I couldn't see how the two would merge because I wanted to do this Art Adams kind of Jim Lee style. And the two worlds of visual languages and lines were very different at the time. Weirdly enough, now I can see how the two can intertwine very easily. In fact, so much of Mort Drucker, I started to backtrack it to like the EC Comics days and see that Mort Drucker and Frazetta and Al Williamson all had a similar DNA to some degree, and I started to see why there were traditional comic book influences, even though Mort Drucker went more comedic with his stylings. So that started to enter back into my style later on, but early on I was kind of burying it. Actually, I didn't want to sort of be a Mad Magazine guy if I was trying to have this slick 90s image comic style. So what was probably coming through more, especially in this piece here, you know, is my attempt to do, I mean, you can see there's the Art Adams like teeth thing that Fairchild's doing. That was like a classic Art Adams like face. And then I think what also was coming through was the Disney influence, because I was also considering for a while going into Disney animation as a career. So this was right after like The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and all that kind of re-renaissance for Disney. So I was trying to find ways to sneak that stuff in, you know, with the facial features, the eyes got a little bit bigger. People often thought it was an anime influence because of the tech and things that kind of are more comic book based more than Disney, but it was really more of a Disney influence, you know, coming into the girls' faces and that sort of thing.
Right. Actually, speaking of your animation influence, I mean, you know, some of the, I'm going to sort of jump around a little bit, but, you know.
Yeah. It does have to be linear.
Yeah. So something, you know, that I always think about are the way you do turnarounds for your stuff, like on the Fairy Tale Fantasies, you know.
Yeah.
The amount of work that you put into getting those figures just the way you want them. And honestly, the way Sideshow makes those into 3-dimensional images is kind of astounding. I mean,
yeah, no, I mean, I mean, I feel like I'm fortunate enough to have a partnership with a company that's kind of like, I mean, not kind of, I mean, absolutely is like their standards are just so up there. I mean, I have so many of their collectibles in my own personal collection that, you know, pretty much like, so I mean, so to team up with a company I admire and wants to do my work has been great. I mean, but yeah, it definitely is a lot of work though, because sometimes what you think is obvious about your style, you realize, no, you have to kind of walk people through it. So, I mean, they'll be very talented sculptors, but you kind of realize, oh, you know, one of the things I think that's come up the most is when it comes to converting my work into 3D, which I've been fortunate enough to do ever since McFarlane did Danger Girl toys back in the 90s, is I often have found people will exaggerate my exaggerations, which is the tricky part to rein it in. Most correcting I do with the statues is just to say, no, you went too far. Let's rein it in. Because if I do a thin waist, the waist gets even thinner. Or if I do the big eyes, the eyes are even bigger. So usually that's what's 90% of the time with the statues is reining it back in, because I think people think they're doing my style, but really they're almost going too far, and you have to kind of pull it back sometimes. But yeah, this is all the, oh gosh, maybe the original fairy tale fantasies that we did.
Sure.
Back in, I guess it was 2010, I think it was.
Maybe.
So yeah, so, and some of these are still, even though some of these images now are over a decade old, they're still presently getting turned into statues. We have two more that have been, well, there have been 4 of the fairy tale fantasy statues that have come out. A couple of recolors too, where they re-release it with another color scheme.
Mhm.
There's a 5th one that was just announced, Red Riding Hood. We have 2 more that are to be debuted probably early next year, and then we're developing 3 to 4 more ones after that. So it's an ongoing project, which I'm really excited about. I mean, we'll be entering into the double digits of fairy tale statues pretty soon. So I love the process, but it is time consuming. I mean, people have probably seen online when I post the turnarounds. I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of notes to get it just right.
Actually, Bill, could you put up some of the turnarounds maybe? You know, Jeff, it's funny when you were talking about dealing with the guys who are doing the statues.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because, you know, there were, I remember really early on Gen 13, when you'd be running late, occasionally there would be a fill-in artist. And
Yeah.
some of them would be, you know, they're all talented, but they were trying to draw like you without really getting it. Like the thing that always made me laugh was there were a couple of artists that had like that kind of wave in the hair.
Yeah.
And
Right.
but not really knowing why it's there.
Right. Well, I mean, I think we all would do that. Like, I mean, when I first got in, we were all doing the cross hatching with no idea of what that was. We just thought we were doing what Jim Lee and everybody, I mean, and I'm sure to some degree when I came in and had my little ciphers and my little things of what I would do, people would kind of go, I think that's what that is. Or like, I know what you're talking about. Like there's like a shine I would do in the hair sometimes. And then people just do that all the time. And I mean, in some ways I grew to like that I had imitators that would do that, because to me, if it started to become that easy to figure out, I didn't want to do it anymore. Like I'd go like, oh, like that's now become a cliche. So why would I do that anymore? So then I would find a new way of doing something, you know, like, so that's oftentimes been, I mean, actually when I did Wildsiders, that was a big part of it. When I was bringing more of the more Drucker stuff with the faces and trying to shed away anything that people thought they'd figured out. I remember when I did the Danger Girl sketchbook and put that out, I had some colleagues go, why would you do that? You've just given everybody like the how-to book on how to ape your style. And part of me was like, good, because I should do something, I should change it up. I should not be doing the same thing over and over and over again. So even though I like that I'm recognizable, I think that's important too, to have a recognizable style. And sometimes I've had to rein it back in to be more, you know, sometimes I get too far from being myself. But I think at the same time, it's that balance of having a recognizable style with also like, I got to keep myself interested and change it up enough so people aren't bored or it's too predictable. You can't do that either. So
Yeah. Hey, on Wildsiders, which
yes,
someday hopefully we'll still finish. But on Wildsiders, that was an interesting project because the color was so integral to the
yes,
to the actual thing. And I can't remember who colored that. Was that Justin? No, he was.
No, that was Edgar Delgado actually.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, and it was that was interesting. I almost felt like this is gonna sound so highfalutin of myself or something like that. But I mean, in a way, I kind of felt like I was like, James Cameron or Spielberg trying to find a special effects studio to do this effect I wanted to do, and it wasn't, not every colorist would be up for it. I had to really get somebody in the mix to say, hey, like we need to figure this look out, otherwise it's not, the whole comic book won't work. So I had a lot to do with holograms, and I was drawing. I would draw the page, and then I would draw another page on top of it with the hologram. I was making life really hard on myself. But it was a cool effect. Yeah,
it looked beautiful.
Yeah. Statues. This is the Red Riding Hood that just was announced, and there's my initial drawing to show them what I conceptualized as the. And these things morph and change too. Like if when, like, you can see that tree there, and then as we were developing it, I was like, oh, that tree, what if it resembled like a creepy hand, like out of like the fairy tales, where sometimes the trees take on like human traits. So we ended up making that look almost more like a hand, and there's another one coming out, so it almost looks like they're grabbing her like this, kind of. It's pretty cool. But right. That's the fun thing about doing these statues is we would start off doing literal. Oh, there's the turnarounds we were talking about. We would start off doing like very literal translations of the previous calendar pieces, but now we kind of take them as a jumping off point and go, well, how much further can we take this, or what can we, maybe we can, in the case of the Cinderella one, we reconceptualized the whole piece so that it wasn't the exact scene I showed in the calendar, but instead, like when her dress was being made versus it being disappearing or at the end of the ball or whatever it was. So, and in this case, like I said, we kind of did an amalgam of several of the different Red Riding Hoods I did. And yeah, doing the turnarounds it's a fun exercise to figure out, volume to the figure. And sometimes you'll find what looks good this way. If you turn it, it kind of falls apart. So then you have to change the pose to better reflect a general. Because with Sideshow, something I always keep in mind is they really want you to enjoy the statue from all angles. They don't like it when things are blocking. Like if you have a background diorama and it blocks the back of the statue, for instance, they tend to go, oh, our collectors like to spin it around and see the whole thing. So it's interesting to develop art when you're thinking like that, not just the one angle that's the money shot, but kind of like you have to go, oh, how can I keep this interesting from every position? So in fact, this one here too, doing 5 angles, that's I mean, I've done as many sometimes as like 6 or 7, just because I'm really trying to get every single like thought through as far as like to the 3D designer, so they can really see every possibility as to how the anatomy moves and works and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I mean, obviously, you can see the Disney influence in all this. But
right.
While I think you would have done a great job as an animator, I'm glad you didn't wind up doing that. Like,
right.
There are some guys out there who do animation and they still draw, they still do stuff, but like Steve Purcell, he's a great director, animator, but
yeah,
I love his art so much. I wish he would do more comic stuff, but
right.
Because they almost pay the same thing, right? Yeah. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some positions in animation I think that probably definitely pay the big bucks. And as I'm sure if you work at writing comic books, there's always hierarchies and lower hierarchies. But with animation, I'm glad I didn't, because when I was pursuing animation, that was a very different time. Obviously, it was the 2D era of animation, but not only was it the 2D era, but like the back then, not only were you the designer of the character, if you got to be in that position where you got to design the character, but you designed it so that you could animate it. So the designing of like Glenn Keane and the 9 Old Men and these guys who were kind of the famous animators, they would design the characters and then they would animate them. So that was a very personal connection. Now in the CG era, the rock stars tend to be the designers, but they're not necessarily the animators. They design the characters, and they're the ones the names you still know and become household names. But then they there's the very talented animating teams, but they animate it's almost like they're puppeteers more than anything now. Animating is puppeting these creations that have already been sort of established as what they are. So in that sense, I'm glad I didn't go that route, because I think that would have been very pigeonholed. I don't think I could have lasted. I think I would have wanted to have that personal expression, which is what drew me to comic books anyways. The fact that you can do your personal stamp on all these characters, and it's encouraged.
So let me ask you on a different kind of question. So
Yeah.
obviously working with at Wildstorm in the early days, Jim was a big influence, and like you said, kind of a dream come true to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
What were your other like big fanboy moments outside of Wildstorm? I mean, would it be, I don't know. I mean, you did some covers for Batman, you did some covers for Superman. Were those things that you always wanted to do, and that it was kind of a thrill to do?
I mean, sure. I mean, I think when I finally started doing Marvel covers, and certainly later on more DC in recent years, there's always a fanboy aspect of that. You want to feel like I think any comic book artist wants to have a legacy where they've at least dabbled with these iconic characters as much as possible. And I certainly would probably say I dabbled. I wouldn't say that I've done an iconic run of any of these things. Obviously, I would have loved to have been that guy, but I knew my limitations in recent years, or maybe less than recent years, and realized that doing large bulks of interior work just wasn't feasible for me to do. I realized when I was doing Danger Girl how much burnout I felt. And I had so much burnout. I felt it for years after Danger Girl. I mean, and that wasn't even that long of a run. It was like, 7 issues, with the last one being double. So you could kind of almost say it was like 8 or
In the preview.
8-ish. Yeah, in the preview. So like in some ways it was a solid run, but not like it went on for years and years in the sense of like there was 30 issues or something like that. But that was enough to burn me out, because it was my own creation. I was very invested in it. I poured everything I had into every page, and I didn't know how to do anything else than to give my all on every page. And I really felt the impact it had on my personal life, on my sort of enjoyment of life. And so yeah, it's nice to dabble with these characters. I wish I could do more with them and do, but I mean, I'm very happy with the niche, or whatever you want to say, I've carved out for myself. I still create content all the time for myself. It's not necessarily in the sequential comic book realm, which I do miss. I do enjoy. I've always enjoyed telling sequential stories. It's just such a labor intensive gig, and as you get older, you realize it's a young man's game. And my hat's off to anybody who can really get that stuff done, because I admire them tremendously. But I just knew my limitations, and I've actually really have been enjoying drawing single images with the covers, with these statues. I realized if I had this hunger or this drive to tell stories, if I had all these stories in my head, I think I would take a different path. But I'm really just driven by imagery. I mean, I just have a lot of cool images in my head. They don't necessarily translate into, every one of them isn't really a story that needs to be told in that sense.
Yeah, but I mean, covers do tell a story. You look at I mean, it's a different kind of medium, but Norman Rockwell's covers always told a story, and I think yours
exactly. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree.
But one thing that I was always kind of sad about, and we don't need to get into any details on it, but I was sad that you never finished that Spider-Man series that you were doing, because
right.
Get on that, with all the iconic villains on. I mean, the first issue was finished, I think, right?
No, the first 2 actually. I mean,
really?
Occasionally I've never really put them out there. I know sometimes when people have projects that don't finish, they eventually find their way on the internet or something like that. I've been very protective of that, because first of all, I feel like Marvel did pay me to do the 2 issues I did do. It's theirs to decide when they're going to do whatever they're going to do with it. It's not my place to put it out there and publish it. Second off, maybe something will still come of it. Once every few years, an editor calls me up and we start talking about it. And even to Jeff Loeb's credit, he called me up during the pandemic and kind of hinted to see if I maybe wanted to jump back on it with him. And I hope I'm not talking out of turn. In fact, we talked about that. But I just had too much on my plate, and I did consider it. I was trying to see, well, geez, can I push things aside and make this happen? But I'm kind of running a small business at this point. I've got actual employees and stuff who run a web store for me and stuff like that. I would be very challenging for me to say, hey guys, I'm going to go do this comic book for another two or 3 years, and I got to shuttle this down. So it makes it very challenging. But I would love to do that at some point. I still think it'd be fun. I mean, when people come over for parties and stuff, sometimes I break out the pages and everybody flips through them and they get a kick out of seeing them. But
how many issues was it? 5 issues?
No, the original run was supposed to be, I mean, the plan was to do sort of like the Spider-Man version of Hush, you know, pretty much, where you would get every issue would have a classic villain. I mean, it was an excellent idea. I loved the idea of it. And there were various reasons why it just kept getting delayed on both our parts. Both Jeff and I had reasons why it just kept getting pushed back. And it was, you know, I'm sure we both look back on it with regrets that kept happening. But yeah, it's. I mean, I look back on those pages now are like, you know, oh gosh, some of them are is like 12 years old or something like this point. But it's like, so it's. Well, I mean, most people say that, so I appreciate that. As an artist, you always see where you've gone since then. So you look back and go, oh, I don't do that anymore. Like, why was I drawing hair like that? You know, you get kind of funny that way. But I mean, people still like it. Certainly was a point in time, you know, like, so it's got that stamp on it. If I was to jump on for some reason finish it, there would be a strange speed bump of like the style changing. But
did you ever see Barry Smith do Red Nails?
No. What is that?
Okay, Red Nails is one of my favorite comic things ever. I mean, it's a Conan story. It ran originally in Savage Tales back in the early 70s. And Smith, there was a gap between the first issue and the second issue. And the stylistic changes between the first part and the second part are incredible. I mean, you should.
And how much time actually was between those two?
I don't remember. I would guess maybe a year and a half, something like that.
Wow. See, I mean, so imagine 12 years.
No, I know, but it's a more. I think if you look at it, you'll see it was a more dramatic change. If you were to finish, and I'm going to go on record saying I hope you do eventually finish it, even if it's a shorter version. You know, do 6 issues or something. Then it's like, you know, you're almost there. You know, you're a third of the way through. But you know, the work is so good, it's a shame that people can't see it. So I'm going to go on record saying that I hope you and Jeff do finish it, because I think it would be a great series.
Well, I do appreciate that. You're not alone. Trust me. I appreciate that people have said that. And I certainly would like to have had that. Here's the other funny thing about the Spider-Man thing, though.
I've never seen this one. That's a great cover. Anyway, sorry.
Oh yeah, that was a fun one. I was very happy. That was an idea I had for years and couldn't believe anybody else didn't beat me to it. Thank God I was able to do it when I did. But the other thing I will say about the Spider-Man project that is a little bit of a, also kind of like when I was first drawing that Spider-Man book, and we did those, like I said, 12 years ago, I hadn't done a lot of Spider-Man work at that point. I had done a small run of covers for the Straczynski run. I think I'd done about 6 or 7, maybe. I don't know. I'd done a small grouping of covers. And so my doing Spider-Man, that was a big deal. Like I was drawing Black Cat for the first time in the first issue. Like these are big things that would have been very exciting at the time when it came out. Like, because people would go like, oh my God, that's what his Black Cat looks like. Oh my God, that's what, you know. And the problem is ever since then, I've done so many covers now. I've done so many covers of MJ, Black Cat, Spider-Man. Sometimes the salesman part of me goes, oh, am I offering a product that's going to be as exciting as it was when it was first like being thought of? Because I kind of think in some ways I'm already so associated with Spider-Man and the Spider-Women and stuff like that without having even done interiors. And that's entirely based on the bulk of work I've done on covers and statues and I've done so much Spider-Man stuff. It's almost, people have to remind themselves that I didn't do any interiors, because it's just, in some ways I've left already this big impression on those characters already. So the question is, if I do the interiors, is it going to be as exciting as it would have been back? I don't know. I mean, that's just my thought that sometimes comes into my head, is like, is that going to be exciting for anybody? I don't really know.
Right. Oh, that's funny. I've never seen this cover either.
Oh, the McFarlane homage. I actually called up McFarlane personally to say if he was okay if I did that, because I'm actually really not a big homaging. I know that's the big thing everybody does now. Everybody in every cover is an homage, but I'm actually really selective of when I do it. And this one was so fun because I was like, I had done a statue and a really iconic image with her in the yarn. So the idea of doing the webs with the yarn, and it just really worked. I feel like if you can do something clever and unique with an homage, then do it. But if you're just crowbarring it in, just, I don't know. I'm kind of myself personally just so tired of the homages right now. So I try to personally speak, put my pen where my mouth is and try not to do as many of them. But this one I was pretty happy with how it turned out.
Oh, and Ben colored it. Oh, nice.
Oh no, that's actually Sabine Rich actually.
Oh yeah. See, I looked at the signature and I thought it was Sync. Okay.
Oh, I have to compare those two signatures. That's, I mean, Ben has done some stuff over me. He did a Danger Girl piece that was the cover of the collection. That was something Ben did over me. But and by the way, this one that's up right now, this is like, this is how I usually pitch my cover concepts to Marvel. And what you're seeing right there, these drawings are like this big. Like I do all my cover comps like super, super tiny. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to overcommit to it in some ways. I feel like if I can get a few ideas out and they're just like this, first of all, you get quite a bird's eye view of the anatomy and everything to get everything kind of worked out at that size. It's not very intimidating to fill up a space this big if you get stage fright as far as like lack of ideas. And then more recently, in recent times, I like drawing my little layouts this big because so much of what that's actually one that never got turned into a cover, by the way, but I thought that was a fun idea.
Cool.
But the other thing too I like about drawing my covers this small now is so much of what we do now is with this. So to me, I almost like, especially thinking more from a retailer, like because I do market my own comics and sell my own comics and do my own exclusives, I have to think in the sense of like what is going to look good on this versus like what's going to look good on this spinner rack over here, but it's like and part of that is just adapting to the modern times. So to me, drawing it really small helps me visualize how it's going to grab somebody in a thumbnail on a website or something like that, because on some level the really busy covers don't work as well. I still do them occasionally, but sometimes a really busy cover will not translate well on the phone.
It's funny. I mean, when you talk about what looks good on a phone, it's really true. On my end in publishing, when we talk about going into PRH, which is Penguin Random House, and getting stuff on Amazon, most people look at that stuff on their phone. So you need something that is identifiable. So
like I'd say about 10 years ago when we first were creating my website, we created it for like a desktop computer. That was how you designed websites back then. And you see the demographics now. You see like the visitors on your website, they'll often be like 80% or even higher than that are phones. So now the desktop experience is the secondary thought when you design a website, because you're going like, well, that's gonna be like 20%, maybe 15%. Most people are going to look at it on the phone. So I think that's a big part of why I think that way now. Like, and I don't even know if it's really, sometimes so much of what I do is instinctual. I don't necessarily sometimes I try to break it down and put a logic to it like I'm doing now. But I think I started just thinking more like a phone. So like a lot of times the comic book covers, I just think like, oh, is that going to look good on a phone? And I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it is what it is. So I tend to think that way now.
It's funny. I was just looking at the previous cover, the one with MJ by the bridge.
Gwen, yeah.
Oh, Gwen, sorry, yeah. And the colorist in this is Sabina.
Yeah, this is Sabine. I mostly work with Sabine in the last few years. There's always like the occasional outliner where I will be like work with Peter Steigerwald. He's done some really nice stuff with me. Ula Moss has done it. The Spider-Man one with the Black Cat for the video game, that was Ula Moss. But yeah, it's funny actually. I've worked with mostly female colorists in the last like decade. I'm starting with Niai Rufino. She did a lot of the early fairy tale stuff with me and stuff like that. in more recent years with Sabine, and then also with Ula. And
All right.
yeah, so that's it's kind of funny, but I find they just have an aesthetic that really suits my line, especially with the women characters. They know how to do makeup and contouring of the faces. They have a really nice blending with my style, which I always have been very happy with.
I just really love the way she did the knockout on the bridge. I mean, the color was so perfect.
Yeah.
Just
Well, it's
really
funny because I tend to encourage that, even though as an artist you can lose detail. And in fact, this one we're looking at right now, I think that's not even the final version, because I think there was some knockouts done with that brownstone in the background. And usually I will often sacrifice my own artwork or line art for the sake of a more overall, presentation. So to me, even if there's the sense that detail gets lost, if it's helping the overall presentation of the artwork, I'll always go with that. So, and there's always a line art book down the road where somebody can appreciate all the line art if they want to. But to me, it's really more about, that's a short story I did. There's sort of a interior panel thing I did recently with a short story in Marvel 1000, I think they called it. I don't even know what Marvel 1000 was.
See, I saw this, and the first thing I think is, God damn it, I want him to do more sequential stuff. Seriously.
That's very nice. That's very nice. No, I mean, it was fun to do, and I obviously could tell I was probably trying to cram 3 pages worth of art into 1 page, but which is classic Danger Girl era. But yeah, no, it's and that was a fun little story where they let me write it too, which was kind of fun. They gave me a story that was a little somber, and I was like, can I just write something? And something that suited my taste, and thankfully they let me do all these little gags, which was pretty funny.
You have a pretty playful style, so.
No, thank you. I think that's again, it certainly was present in Danger Girl, and probably is that Mad Magazine influence coming through again, and the animation, I think, aspect, because everybody's playing very big to the camera, that sort of thing. But yeah.
Oh, that's another nice one.
You know what's so funny about this one? I was really up against it. I was moving from Colorado to California. I was behind on getting Todd McFarlane pages for Spawn 300. San Diego Comic-Con was happening, and I had to do a cover. I was on a monthly cover for a job and I said, guys, I think it's time to do the headshot. Because I don't have anything else in the tank right now, and I really felt bad about it, because I was trying to be clever and trying to do the Adam Hughes thing where I'd really think. I think the one right before this, I did this thing with 9 lives, and there was a 9 and all the different ways Black Cat died but came back or something. And I was trying to put all this thought into it, and I was like, I was just gonna do a headshot. And I was like, what if she's just like, it was so like funny, and so I was like, oh, this is so lame. Like, what am I doing? And people loved this cover. I got so many compliments on this cover, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was such a. I even drew it I think I drew it like on a smaller paper too, because I 11 by 17. I didn't have time to fill a whole 11 by 7. Right. So it's actually got funny dimensions. Actually, the original actually goes out a little wider. But yeah, that was kind of I was actually very pleased that people. That's the thing you kind of start to realize sometimes giving, it kind of reminds me of like rock music or something like that, like with AC/DC. Part of the power chord sounds so good because there's a gap in between it. Like that's why it goes like darn. Like it's like it wouldn't sound as good if they didn't have that gap. And sometimes
sure
visually you need a gap too, whether it's like in the actual like page you're looking at. You can't have all noise. And sometimes a cover run, it's refreshing to suddenly zoom in and show a face like that, because it breaks that up. So it's not so your mind doesn't get fatigued by the same thing or same body shape filling up the frame all the time.
So speaking about filling stuff up, on that one close-up cover, the headshot, it almost looks to me like that the signature is almost in a weird place in the hand. Is that because you drew it and you were like, oh crap, I don't have any place to put my signature?
Oh no, that happens often actually. I'm trying to be, in recent years I've tried to be better about actually thinking through where the signature is going to be in advance, and I'll actually sketch it in way early now if I can. Yeah. But there's still all those times where I forget and I'm like, oh, I didn't put the signature somewhere in. Yeah, it can be a problem sometimes. I've had a few times where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've already like done the whole ground. And I have to white it out to put a signature in, because otherwise they just get lost.
So I mean,
Yeah.
some artists have very simple signatures. You know, like Adam Hughes, you know, he doesn't have that problem. You know, but
Right.
your signature is complex, and like Walt Simonson also, you know, same kind of thing. It's got that
Right.
or almost ornate-ish signature.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I mean, it's funny when I sign comic books, it's very large, and it's like I remember when when what's it called? I guess when when the previous president was president, they would show him signing things, and it was always very big, and they always said, "Oh, well, that has to do with his big ego or something like that." And I always go like, "Well, I sign comic books large. I don't know what that's about." But what I found was for years when I first got into comic books, I would do these, or first got into the industry. That was the Image days, and like I would be signing next to Jim Lee and signing next to all these guys, and that was the thing back in the '90s. Everybody signed their name really big. And so now I just do it without even thinking about it. So sometimes even too on the original art, I'm going like, am I signing it too large? Like, I don't even know, but it's like, in a way it's your brand though. So you kind of have to get it on there somewhere. It's funny, actually, I can't find the signature on that one there. I'm sure it must have been there somewhere. That's funny now. I don't know where it is. Funny. I'll have to go back and look at the printed version and see if it's if it's on there. I don't remember. Yeah. Very funny. Occasionally it happens, I guess.
Jim's actually the fastest.
Oh no, I got it.
It's I've ever seen. Is it? Where is it?
Let's see here. Let me see if I can get it on there. Yeah, there it is. I don't know. I'm not sure why it didn't show up in that file, but
okay.
But anyway, so some of these files I can see are working versions or something like that. But yeah, there's another one. My little pencil layouts. Again, those things are very tiny, and sometimes I'll composite them digitally. So those are 2 drawings I did pencil, and then I scanned them in and threw a little color overlay. I can break it up. But yeah, in fact, actually, I'm doing another book of these where I call it the rough stuff, where I just show these little tiny drawings, and so yeah, we're putting another one of those together. People seem to really like those.
So. How long is it actually? I mean, like in a perfect world, when you're not up against an incredible deadline, you know, when you do a cover from start to finish, how long is the process? I mean, you do the rough and you send it in, you get it approved, and then you do the pencils, and then now,
right.
Are you inking your own stuff now, or are you digitally inking it?
No, I've been inking my own stuff since I think the pardon me, the second calendar I think that we did together, back in. I think I've been inking myself since probably 2011, pretty much consistently. So yeah, it's funny. I was intimidated to ink myself for so long, and people would always say, I mean, you were probably one of them. It was like, oh, your pencils are so tight, they could just print the pencils, and we did do that for a little while. But I was finding I was like sitting there and I was fussing with the pencils, making them so precise, only to get halfway there. Really, it's like the pencils is not really a finished product.
Right.
So then at some point I was like, I should just start inking this because I'm so precise anyways, rather than doing that second glossy layering of the penciling. Why not just make that the ink stage, And at first I was intimidated by it because I was like, well, I don't want to deal with the crow quills and the brushes and anything like that. But I always remembered, when Jim would need to do something, Jim Lee, when he'd have to get something done, he'd just break out the Pigma art pens and just do it. And I always liked that look. I always thought that was with the little blunt ends and stuff like that. I liked the look of markers. So at some point I just started doing that, and I found it was really exhilarating because I got really into art again, and I started like playing around with dry brush and spattering ink on it and doing all these kinds of crazy things. And it really got me pretty, it re-energized me. And I'm kind of going through another one of those phases now where I'm really trying to dabble. I haven't shown much of it, but I'm trying to dabble more with like digital art now. And I'm kind of having a similar feeling I had about 10 years ago when I started inking myself. I'm going like, oh my gosh, there's all this other thought that gets held back at the gate about color that I can kind of get out there a little bit through talking with my colorists and stuff, but it's always me color directing versus just doing it kind of. So I'm hoping in the next year or two, people will start seeing that aspect as well. But yeah, as of now, I just pencil and ink and work with colorists very closely.
Well, I think it's often the case, not always, it's often the case that a penciler is his or her own best inker. I mean, nothing against Alex Garner, nothing against Scott Williams, but your work has, I don't know. I mean, it's your work entirely. It's not an interpretation.
Yeah.
Good,
I mean, that's why I don't really. I mean, I've worked with really great inkers and admire
Oh,
a lot of really great inkers, but I think that's really what it comes down to. It's to me, it's like it's not even about it being better. It's about it just being me. And I think any artist wants it to be them. Like if I start messing around with color, it's very possible a lot of people say, "Oh, well, Eyes coloring was way better on you," and they might be right, or for many reasons. But at least it'll be my version of what I saw in my head, and that's all that really matters, really, to me. So.
yeah, but it doesn't matter because it has to be you. Oh, I always love this cover. This
Oh
is
yeah.
actually a triptych, yeah.
Yeah.
But it there will always be people who say, "Oh man, I wish he could draw like the Gen 13 miniseries again or something." And
Right.
that's fine. I mean, there are a lot of people out who love that stuff and have a real nostalgia for it. But artists change and they grow. Actually, I know this is your interview, but or you're the one who's doing the talking. People want to hear. But I'll tell you a little funny story about that. I'm a big Walt Simonson fan. Maybe my favorite comic of all time is the run he did of Manhunter and Detective Comics. Just 7 issues.
Okay.
I always loved it. And so I was actually on the East Coast a couple months ago, and I had dinner with Walter and Wheezy, Louise Simonson, and a couple of friends, Gene Scrocco and Greg Hildebrand. And we were having a real nice time. And somebody had mentioned something about, Walter and his style and how great it is now. And I really think he's doing the best work of his career now, which is, kind of remarkable. Very few people do get better and better as they get older. You look at like Joe Kubert, he did that too. But so, I said that. I said, I think, that the work you're doing now is, some of the best of your career. And Wheezy had a little like glint in her eye, and she smiled and she looked at me and she goes, "Better than Manhunter?" and I thought about it for a second, and I said, okay.
That's very funny.
Yes, better than Manhunter.
Wow, she called you on it.
No. I said artistically, but right. I'll always love Manhunter the most because that was the stuff when I was, 10 years.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Why a lot of times people will say, "Oh, I like that era better." I mean, in some cases, there are artists and musicians come to mind too, where they just obviously did their best work at a certain period of time. I mean, as much as I love later work by the Beatles were the Beatles when they were the Beatles, and then everything was a little lesser then,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when it comes to a lot of times I think there is a nostalgia aspect to it. Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, I loved, like, I have a favorite period of Arthur Adams, but sometimes I have to go, well, yeah, I really liked that version of his style and I liked what he was doing then, but that was also when I was being my early days of being inspired to be a comic book artist. And I remember what it was like to go to the comic book store, and it was still very exciting. And I remember the excitement of what my career could be if I was a comic book artist. So I associate a lot of other baggage onto art style at that time that has nothing to do with art's ability then and now. It just has to do with my personal experience. And I think a lot of people bring their own personal experience to the attachment they have of music, of art, of lots of things like you're describing with the Manhunter thing. I think that's a huge part of it that I think sometimes people don't stop and reflect about with their own personal experiences. Like if somebody will always love, let's say, the Danger Girl era more than anything I'm doing now, I get it. I don't even like take really offense at it because I'm going like, they were probably like really living life in a great way at that point, and that's one aspect of many things they loved about it. So I think that's cool. I think that's always a fun thing. But yeah, I mean, but I'm also, as an artist, very much aware I don't want to be that guy who's still on stage performing, doing when everybody else is like going like, oh, it's just not, he shouldn't be doing that anymore. I mean, I'm hoping at some point I'll know when to make my exit, but I feel myself still growing. And I mean, sometimes you look back on things and you go, oh, that was a weird dead end I got into with my style. And you kind of like there are times I can look back on and go, oh, what was I doing? I was experimenting with that and that did not work long term. And I'm glad I abandoned that, but I think on some level, you want to think you're steadily getting better, or certainly not declining. I mean, that's nobody wants to be doing that.
Do you know the Ricky Nelson song "Garden Party"?
I know of Ricky Nelson. I don't know if I know that song now.
Garden Party is a song. It's a very short story. Garden Party is a song that he did in the 1970s. He did a concert at Madison Square Garden, and it was it was like an oldies concert, and he got booed when he started doing some new songs, and so he wrote.
Isn't that horrible?
Garden Party. Actually, on this Wonder Woman cover, I was I was only flipping through the stuff you sent. Bill a little while ago, and again talking about likenesses, the likeness on her face is just perfect. I mean that's
thanks. Yeah.
And and actually, Bill, could you show some of the Harrison Ford drawings,
the sketch cards?
But you always, again, and I think this, and I could be totally off base, but I think this goes back to your Mort Drucker influence.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah, I mean it's almost entirely. I mean it's entirely Mort Drucker with a bit of Drew Struzan. Yeah, I mean I'm trying to do some of those, and with the Drew Struzan, it's more the technique stuff. He would do lots of cool little sketchy things. I mean I'm fortunate enough to actually have a Drew Struzan Indiana Jones original in my office here, which is pretty awesome. I love looking at that, but. Yeah, these were sketch cards. It was funny. It was actually Adam Hughes who got me into doing these sketch cards, because I saw, this is going back when the last Indiana Jones movie came out, that fourth one that I can't believe is already
the really good one.
Sure, but they were I think Topps was doing that was when the doing sketch cards hidden within the cards was a thing, and maybe it's still a thing. Right. I don't know, but so Adam Hughes had done some of them, and I was corresponding with them going like, oh, that looks so fun. It looks like you were having such a blast with these. And he goes, you should definitely do them. And I'm like, well, it looks like they were already done. Like this already happened. He goes, no, they're doing another series. You should jump in on it. And I was like, really? And it made no sense financially. It was probably one of the dumber things as far as like my time, but I couldn't resist like doing these sketch cards. And again, they were never published. They were just, you like these cards you're seeing, there's one of one, they're out there. And there's actually one guy, I forget his name. He's based out of London, and he's collected quite a bit of them. He's tracked down, like I did about like 66 of them or something like that. And he's got something like 48 of them. And whenever one pops up, he goes and tracks it down. And the weird thing is like much like Indiana Jones himself, like in the stories, there's probably sealed boxes still in saran wrap somewhere, like that probably some of these are still in there. That's the funny thing about them. But it was definitely a fun gig to do these. It's funny, I did start off doing them in marker, and by the end they were like pencil like this. I was like, I'm not going to ink this. But it was a fun gig to do these. And Harrison Ford's, that was one of my favorite ones. I like that one a lot. Sometimes you just get a likeness and you're like, oh, that just works. And he's got a tricky likeness too, because Harrison Ford's got I don't know if you've ever seen that thing where they show Harrison Ford's face and then they split it in half and then mirror each side, and it looks like he's got a very asymmetrical face. It's very funny. So when you're drawing him, you have to throw out all comic book convention out the window, because he's got a very unique look that's so himself.
Which explains the profile.
Yes. Like his nose kind of bends a certain way, and his nose looks totally different from one side to the other. It's very strange. But once you sort of, I mean, Adam Hughes more so than me, but I kind of have figured out these little things that kind of make Harrison Ford look like Harrison Ford. It would be fun to do a actual like story with one day. I'm sure it'll never happen, but it would be fun to do it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Actually, Bill, do we have any questions for Jeff from the audience? And if not, no worries. But
I did see some earlier. People were asking about whether or not there would ever be any artist edition books coming out one day with Jeff's work in it.
Well, there was one, but it was the Marvel covers the modern era. But I would love to do an artist edition with Jeff. I mean, I'd like to track down Danger Girl stuff if I could, and do it.
Well, didn't we sort of like made contact with a few different collectors who had large portions of it, as I recall, but because that's the trick, is you have to have the scans, and a lot of these older things, unless you find a collector who has like a big deposit. It's like you can't source it. I do know that since you told me about when you started doing these, Scott, about like, what was it, 10 years now? Have you been doing those? I did start from that moment on always doing the high res color scans of everything I do. Because I'm like, okay, I got to remember that now at least, so I don't make that blunder again. Because all we have from that era is like Xeroxes, and you have those like streaks in them, and then of course like maybe we have scans here and there, but like even those are hard to find these days. Like I don't know where all the scans are of the black and white Danger Girl art. I wasn't in that department at the time, so yeah. Now I scan my stuff, of course, on my own, and
yeah.
So I'm always backing up my archives and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think if there was ever an artist edition, I love those books. But if it was me, I think it would probably be a hodgepodge of like probably different things. It wouldn't be like, I mean, unless we could find the Danger Girl and Gen 13 stuff, maybe. But yeah, more caricature stuff. I think this was like the fan art challenge last year when people did 6 fan arts. It was like a thing, like a meme everybody was doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, whenever I find an excuse to do caricatures, I'll crowbar them in because I never can get them in any other way. It's funny, so many people though, they tell me like, "Oh, I love it when you do caricatures. I love it," but like, Instagram doesn't lie. Like you see what the likes are, and they're almost never what a girl Marvel cover will get. And so at the end of the day, I'm a commercial artist, and I'm like, okay, I'd love to draw more Bill Murray, but that's like literally like 20% of my audience, who thinks that's great. So, but oh well. So you only get it once in a while.
Well, maybe we could talk about doing a full book of just your covers. I mean, you've certainly done enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, well, the Marvel covers alone. I mean, I was doing the page count recently on like because there's those really beautiful ones on like Alex Ross, and Jim Lee has a DC one, and I was going like, I was actually doing a page count going like, man, I actually, with Marvel alone, I actually have enough like material to do like a hardbound, like coffee table Marvel book, but I don't even know how they decide to go about making those, or if you approach them, I don't even know. But
yeah, we have a license with Marvel, and I mean, anytime we do something, we either deal with the creator if it's a creator-owned property or the company,
right?
But it'd be really cool, and I'm sure that Marvel wouldn't let us do this, but maybe I'll ask. If you're never going to finish that Spider-Man book, and even if you are, the print run isn't going to be anywhere near what the comic would be, but maybe we could do a artist edition with those 2 issues and a bunch of covers too.
I mean, you never know. I know they've approached. There was one conversation I had with Marvel where they did float the idea of just running it unfinished and say, here's this thing, but it's so unusual for them to do something like that. I don't see them doing that. That seems very, I mean, what you're describing makes way more sense than Marvel putting it out, because they're very mainstream what they're thinking. It's worked for them. So I don't know. I think that would be too bizarre. The other thing too is some of the storyline aspects. That's another problem with if we ever finish it. They kind of took some of the things that were going to be really cool about the story and eventually did it. But with other storylines. so like there's I don't want to give away any certain things, but there's like, I'll go as far as to say there were other Spideys other than like Peter Parker, and they've done a lot of that in recent stories. So I think they might have taken some of those ideas and said, well, this isn't coming out, so we're just going to take those. We'll pick it like leftover turkey. So I think on some level that's not to say that I think Jeff had an idea of maybe reworking some of the narrative to suit a different purpose and still kind of have the same visuals, which I'm sure could be possible. But it was like, again, I wish I could go more detail about it, but there were certain things in there that ultimately they did anyway. So it's kind of like it lost some of its punch in a weird way. It kind of reminds me of like with both aspects of Danger Girl and Gen 13, they were both fresh in certain ways when they came out, and then they've been picked over so much with other media that I feel like they would never have the impact that it could have had if we had done some sort of movie development with both those properties back in the 90s or 2000s.
Yeah.
So
well, I'll definitely run it by them and see. I mean, don't get your hopes up, anybody, because I think it's like a 5% chance, but it would be great.
I mean, the thing is, it'll eventually get out there somehow. I just don't know when and how, but it will. I mean, it's like at some point, at some point it is done, and somebody will want to see it, and somebody will make the decision. But it's not my decision to make; it's Marvel's decision to make. Is how I look at it.
Definitely worth seeing. I mean, I know it's older work, so it'll always be like.
I'm sure I'll get a phone call from them on Monday now, going like, "Hey, like there's a lot of chatter about."
Yeah, we had the same idea.
I'm sure I'll get that call, and then I'll have to do my little tap dance, like humna.
Well, I hate to do this, guys, because I think we could probably talk another hour, but I've got another panel that's just starting up in the other room.
Oh goodness, it's geez, we went overtime.
It's been an hour. Yeah, I do these things, and a lot of times they last 2 hours because we end up having so much fun with it. But, but we try to be a little more regimental on the panels when we do this regular show.
Understood.
But I can't tell you how much I appreciate the fact that both of you guys were able to do this today. We had a really great turnout in the panel, so we'll have to do it again sometime. Yeah, without question. So
very cool.
And Scott, you're always welcome. You can do another panel in 6 months, or you can have a show anytime you want in between. I'm always here for you.
Well, thanks, man.
There you go, Scott. Take him up on it.
So, I mean, you know what? This guy runs the best resource for comic art in.
Oh, I know, and everybody knows.
I am a lucky guy. That is for sure. Always, it's never feels like work when you're doing stuff you enjoy. Oh yeah, this is in February. Calf will be 19 years old.
Yeah, there you go. Boy, we're all feeling catching up to us now.
I know. Crazy. I know. Trust me. Yeah, I think about that, and I'm like, man, I can't believe I've stuck at one job for that long. I mean, it's good, right? I mean, as an artist, you get to do that. Scott, you've been involved in publishing and the arts for a long time, but it's tough to kind of keep that focus for so long with something. But when you love what you're doing, it's hard to get tired of it.
Absolutely. That's the dream. That's what we all want.
That's what all three of us have in common. We love what we do.
Very true. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna sign us off, but thank you so much for doing this. And
my pleasure. And thanks.
I can do for either of you guys. You let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Bill. Thank you, Scott. And thanks to everybody, all the people who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed it.
There you go. We're ending it on all worship, J. Scott Campbell from Todd.
Actually, he said he has one of the Indiana Jones cards too.
I know.
Oh, very nice. All right, everybody. Nice. Thanks for tuning in, and check out the next panel. I believe it's Bendis and Marquez are going at it right now.
All right.
All right, cool.